The yellow barn leaned under a hard blue sky, like a drunk trying to hold itself upright, its shadow stretching long across the cracked earth. Shingles lay scattered across the dusty yard in broken rows, their paint faded to the color of old bone. The double doors hung from torn canvas hinges that flapped in the hot wind, slapping against the warped frame with a rhythm like a slow heartbeat. Dust rolled across the open prairie in thick clouds, swirling around the barn's cracked foundation and drifting into the shadows beneath the sagging roof. From the ridge above, Wakiza pulled his horse to a stop and studied the structure below. 28 summers had taught him to read land the way white men read books, and this piece of earth told a story written in blood and lies. The grass here grew in patches yellow and stunted nothing like the rich green that should have covered the bottomlands this close to water. Thunder Creek gleamed in the distance, a silver ribbon cutting through brown grass. Once that water had fed his people's riverside camp. Once children had laughed along those banks while women cleaned fish and men shaped arrow shafts in the shade of cottonwoods. That was before the flood, before the wall of water came roaring down from the hills in the middle of a dry summer and tore the village away like it was made of paper. Before his younger brother Lakota drowned. Wakiza had been hunting that day, tracking an elk 2 miles from camp. He remembered the roar like thunder, but continuous growing. By the time he reached the valley, the water was receding, leaving behind mud and destruction. He had found Lakota half buried in silt, one arm still reaching toward old Chaska's body 10 feet away. His brother had been 16 summers old. He had loved horses and could make anyone laugh. The last thing Lakota had said that morning was a joke. "Bring back something good. I am tired of eating roots." Wakiza had brought back the elk. But Lakota was already dead. The army had called it an accident, a natural dam failure. But Wakiza had pulled a smashed warning sign from the wreckage wood, stamped with the name Quicksilver Mining Company, the same company whose name now appeared on the survey map in his saddlebag. Lot 17B, owned by Seamus Kincaid. A shout broke his thoughts. Below, a wagon careened toward a collapsed sinkhole. The team bolted. A man ran after it, shouting in Russian or something close. Wakiza spurred his horse down the slope without thinking. He leaned low, reaching for the traces. His fingers closed around leather just as the wagon hit a fallen beam. The impact threw him. He slammed into the hard-pan air, driven from his lungs, shoulders screaming. A rifle crack split the silence. The bullet splintered the barn wall inches from his head. 3 riders sat their horses along the far fence, silhouetted against the sun. "Let the cursed land rot in June," one shouted. "No red devil's gonna put roots down here." They rode away laughing unhurried. They had delivered their message. Wakiza lay at the foot of the yellow barn, shoulder-throbbing, ribs aching. But the deed in his saddlebag felt heavier than any physical pain. Someone wanted this land empty. Someone was willing to shoot at him in daylight. And that meant his brother's death had been no accident at all. The town of Thunder Creek lived off one river and one telegraph line. A main street of weathered storefronts, a church with a crooked steeple, a courthouse built from river stone. Cattle outfits worked the East Range. Small immigrant farms dotted the west. And on the poorest strip, the Lakota camp sat 40 lodges, housing families who refused the reservations. All depended on the same water. And above them all sat the Quicksilver Mine, controlled by Seamus Kincaid. Wakiza had grown up in the shadow of men like Kincaid. He had learned English from missionaries who spoke kindly while stealing children. He had scouted for the army reading maps for officers who never learned his name. He had watched treaties signed and broken. When the flood destroyed his camp 3 summers ago, late summer 1871, the army investigated for 1 day. Captain Morris declared it an act of nature. Move downstream, accept what cannot be changed. But Wakiza had searched the wreckage for weeks. He found Lakota's medicine bag waterlogged but intact, his mother's cooking pot, and that sign. He kept it hidden along with his questions. Why had a mining sign been above their camp? What dam had broken? The maps showed no dam, so he taught himself to read the legal maze. He spent 2 years working hauling freight, breaking horses, repairing wagons, and saving every cent. He studied survey maps in the courthouse. He listened to drunken miners talk about tailings and mercury and fortunes pulled from Kincaid's hills. When the auction notice for Lot 17B appeared 3 weeks ago, he knew immediately this was where his brother had died. The auction was held on a Tuesday morning in early September 1874. A dozen men gathered, most there from boredom. Kincaid stood at the front in a tailored suit, smiling like a politician. Lot 17B, the clerk announced. 160 acres. Opening bid $5. No one moved. $5 for a homestead. Kincaid's smile widened. That is a bargain. A man could die on that parcel, someone muttered. The stories were legend. 3 families had tried to settle there in 4 years. The first lasted 6 months before their cattle died bloated, frothing. The second left after the father went mad. The third simply disappeared. At the counter stood a young woman clutching a letter. Small, dark-haired, dressed in faded calico, mended many times. A boy clung to her skirt, maybe 5 years old, silent and wide-eyed. Lucia, they called her, the Italian widow. Her husband had died in a mining accident last winter. She had nothing but a wagon, a tired mule, and letters promising her a homestead. Now the clerk told her the company had changed its mind. The parcel was no longer available. But they promised, Lucia said, voice tight. Look, Lot 17B, my name. They promised. The deed reverted to quicksilver mining. There is nothing I can do. I have nowhere else to go. The clerk turned away. Wakiza stood, boots loud on the floor. Every eye followed him. $5, he said clearly. The clerk blinked. Excuse me. I bid $5 for Lot 17B. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Kincaid's eyes narrowed. You understand what you are buying? The clerk asked. I understand. Wakiza placed a $5 coin on the counter, a Liberty Head half-eagle, most of what he had. I accept the terms. The clerk looked at Kincaid, who gave a small nod. Sold. As Wakiza took the deed, cracked, stained, stamped with previous owners, he felt every stare. To them, this looked like stupidity. A Lakota fool taking cursed land. Only Wakiza knew he was stepping onto the ground where his brother died with legal standing to dig for truth. As he left, Lucia stood near the door, watching with anger and desperation. Why did you do that? She asked. Because someone needs to find out what is killing the land, Wakiza said. And I am the only one who will not run when I find the answer. That was my land. They promised it to me. They lied to you, just like they lie to everyone. The question is why. That night, 2 of Kincaid's riders cornered him behind the livery. They moved fast, knives flashing. You had to stick your nose in company business, one growled. Wakiza sidestepped, drove his elbow into the man's jaw. The second slashed, opening a shallow cut along his ribs. He twisted, slammed the man face first into the water trough, kicked the first into a stack of feed sacks. Tell Kincaid I am staying, he said quietly. They limped away, leaving him with a burning wound and certainty that someone needed this land empty, no matter who died. At dawn, Wakiza rode to his new land. The barn looked worse, close half the roof gone, doors hanging by canvas strips. But it was the creek that held his attention. Thunder Creek should have been clear, cold water over stones. Instead, it gleamed with an oily sheen, rainbow patterns like spilled kerosene. The banks were stained gray and white, crusted with mineral deposits. Nothing grew within 5 feet. The grass was yellow dead. His horse pulled back ears flat. Animals knew. Wakiza knelt at the water's edge and sniffed. Sharp, metallic wrong. He touched 2 fingers to his tongue briefly. His mouth exploded with burning. His tongue went numb. He spat rinsed with his canteen. A crow landed and dipped its beak in a tiny pool. Within minutes, it thrashed wings beating mud. Then went still. Not cursed. Poisoned. Wagon wheels squeaked. Lucia's wagon stopped at the fence pulled by a skeletal mule. She held the reins with white knuckles. Fresh bruises marked her arms, purple fingerprints. Her lip was split. What happened? Men from the saloon. They said I should leave town. Her Italian accent was thick. Where I am from is Naples. I cannot afford boat fare, so here I stay. Did they hurt your son? They tried. I hit one with a pan. The mule pulled toward the creek, drawn by thirst. Wakiza moved fast, grabbing the bridle. Do not let that animal drink, unless you want to bury it before sunset. What are you talking about? The water is poisoned. Look at the banks. Lucia stared at the sheen, the gray crust, the dead grass. Her face paled. Madonna, how do you know? Because I just watched that crow die from drinking it. Marco whimpered. Lucia's arm went around him. Then why did you buy this place? Because I need to know who poisoned it, and why. Later, a half-wild dog slunk from under the barn and lapped at the water. Within an hour, it was dead behind the shed, tongue-blackened body stiff. Marco clung to his mother. Mama, what killed it? Lucia looked at Wakiza. What kind of poison does this? He looked north toward the quicksilver mine scaffolding and smoke against the hills. The kind that comes from men, not spirits. Men who care more about silver than lives. Wakiza stayed on the land that killed his brother. The deed gave him legal standing. Lucia, with nowhere else, camped beyond the fence. Need pushed them together. They shared cook fires without speaking much at first. Wakiza boiled coffee-roasted prairie hens. Lucia made flatbread heated beans with wild onions. They ate across from each other and did not pretend to be anything more than 2 people clinging to sinking earth. But slowly they began to talk, small things. Where she was from, a village outside Naples. Where he learned English, missionaries and soldiers. What her husband had been like, quiet, unlucky. What his brother had been like, funny, gone too soon. On the 3rd day, a windstorm hit. The sky turned yellow-gray. Wind screamed across the prairie. Dust whipped through the barn, turning air to choking fog. Wakiza had gone inside to inspect the foundation. Lucia followed, looking for tools. Near the back, she found a support post, carved with names families who had lived here, dates, small crosses. So many dead, she murmured. Up in the loft, Wakiza heard a crack long and low. The main beam was splitting. Someone had sawed partway through it. Move, he shouted, dropping from the loft. He hit the ground running. Lucia turned toward his voice, confused, as the beam groaned. He slammed into her, driving her sideways, taking her to the ground as the roof section came down behind them. Dust exploded. Splinters flew, cutting his arms as he shielded her. When it settled, he lay half on top of her heart, hammering. Her hair was full of grit. Her eyes, wide, furious, shaken, stared up from inches away. You could have warned me softer. She coughed. You would not have listened. Through the torn roof, he could see the mine clearly now. Smoke rising in gray columns. It was cut, Lucia said, pointing to the beam. Someone sawed through it. They are trying to kill us before we understand why. She met his eyes. For the first time, she looked at him not as an intruder, but as a fellow target. Then we need to find out why, before they succeed. Dr. Helene Rousseau arrived the next morning on a gray mare. She was a severe woman in her 40s, with iron-gray hair and pale blue eyes that missed nothing. She had run Thunder Creek's clinic for 7 years. She walked straight to the dead dog and knelt. "Another one," she muttered. "This is the 4th animal I have seen with these symptoms in 2 months, all on or near this land." She opened the dog's mouth, studying the blackened tongue. "And it is not just animals." She pulled out a journal. "The Johnsons' last family here, the father died of tremors and respiratory failure in March. Before him, the Hendersons lost 2 children to seizures. Before them, the Kowalskis abandoned after the wife started bleeding from her gums." She looked up. "This is poisoning." "From what?" Lucia asked. "Mercury, most likely. Arsenic. Both." Dr. Rousseau pointed north. "The mine processes or using mercury amalgamation. The waste has to go somewhere. Downhill into the water. Cheaper than building containment." She collected a water sample in a vial. "I will send this to Denver, but I already know what they will find." "Kincaid," Wakiza said. "Of course, Kincaid. He owns the mine, half the county. Sheriff works for him. Judge owes him. Who will stop him? Then we find proof he cannot deny." That afternoon, Maka rode in from the Lakota camp. Younger than Wakiza by 3 summers, broad-shouldered, quick to anger. He wore a bone breastplate and carried a Winchester. "You should not be here," Maka said. "This place killed our people." "I know. That is why I am here. To die like Dakota. To find out who killed them?" Maka spat. "Kincaid killed them. Why do we need proof?" "Because knowing and proving are different. If we fight now, the army comes. They call it uprising. Use it to push everyone onto reservations. Is that what you want?" "I want justice." "So do I. But not in a way that gets more killed." Wakiza paused. "Kincaid's men are moving fences, strung barbed wire along the clean creek. Our horses cannot reach water." "Then we cut the wire." "No, not yet. We need proof first." Maka kicked at a rock jaw tight. "Proof will not bring back the dead." "No." Wakiza agreed quietly, thinking of Dakota, forever 16. "But it might stop more from dying." Lucia stepped forward. "If the poison comes from the mine, we need to see the mine." "They will shoot us," Maka warned. "Then we do not get close. We follow the water. The creek starts somewhere." Dr. Rousseau nodded. "If we can trace contamination to its source, we have evidence. Physical proof." "We go tomorrow," Wakiza decided. "Before dawn, Lucia and I." "Why her?" Maka demanded. "Because she knows what we are looking for. Her husband worked mines, and she shoots straight when scared." They left Marco with Dr. Rousseau and rode out under stars. They followed Thunder Creek upstream through low grass that turned to broken rock. The creek narrowed, running faster. The sheen grew thicker. The banks turned white with mineral crust. Nothing grew. By mid-morning, they reached where the creek ran straight, carved like a ditch. Gray sludge oozed from a wooden sluice jutting from the hillside, spilling waste directly into water. Above the quicksilver mine sprawled tunnels or carts scaffolding smoke. 3 guards stood at the sluice with carbines. Gunfire exploded. Bullets whined, kicking dirt. One cracked the boulder by Lucia's head, showering her with stone chips that cut her cheek. "Your noses are too deep in company dirt." Bison Bill Harker stood above carbine smoking. "Get off mining ground." Wakiza and Lucia dove behind boulders. She fumbled for her revolver, hands shaking. Wakiza slid a pouch of cartridges toward her. Their fingers brushed. "You shoot high," he said quietly. "Make them duck. I move low." She nodded. Her first shot was wild. Her second closer. Her third made a guard dive. Under that cover, Wakiza circled through a ravine. He tackled the rightmost rider, grabbed the carbine, fired once into the air. The horses bolted. Bill cursed and retreated. "You are dead, both of you. Kincaid will see you buried. Silence." Blood ran down Wakiza's arm, a graze that burned. Lucia crawled to him. "You are hurt." "I am fine." She tore a strip from her skirt, wrapped his arm tight. "Thank you for drawing fire. Thank you for cover." Their eyes met. Something passed between them, acknowledgement they had kept each other alive. The message was clear. The company would kill to keep waste flowing into the creek. But now, they knew where it came from. "We go inside," Wakiza said that night at the barn. Inside the mine itself. Dr. Rousseau looked up from her map. "That is insane." "That is necessary," Wakiza said. "If there are records, logs, orders, correspondence showing they knew the water was contaminated, that is evidence we can use." Lucia nodded. "The foreman's office will have paperwork. Companies always keep records." "How do you know?" "My husband worked mines. They track everything. If Kincaid is cutting corners, it will be written down. Men like him cannot help themselves." "Then we go tonight," Wakiza decided. "4 of us, Lucia, Maka, Dr. Rousseau, me." They left Marco with a trusted elder and rode out under moonless sky. 4 riders toward danger. The mine sat dark, lit by scattered lanterns. Night shift workers moved like ghosts, coughing. They approached from the west through tailings piles, left horses tied, and continued on foot. The mine was a maze of tunnels shored with timber and iron rails. Lanterns every 20 feet cast yellow pools. Men with mercury-stained hands coughed in shadows, faces gaunt, eyes hollow. They moved through side shafts, cloth over mouths against chemical stench. Dr. Rousseau led them by her sketched map. The foreman's office sat near the main shaft timber wall's iron door. A lantern burned inside. Through dirty glass, they saw a clerk working late. They watched until he left for the privy, 50 yards away. Wakiza pried the door with his knife. Inside cramped, cluttered, desks stacked with papers, ledgers on walls or samples maps pinned up. They worked fast. Dr. Rousseau took medical records. Maka searched shelves. Lucia rifled drawers. Wakiza focused on a small safe, not locked, just latched. Inside were ledgers, correspondence, telegraph copies. He opened the top ledger and read by lantern light. September 12th, 1871. Paid J. Harker $50 for waste disposal along parcel 17B. October 3rd, 1871. Engineer O. Whitman submitted report on tailings runoff. Recommended containment pond. Declined. Cost prohibitive. November 20th, 1871. Telegram to Boston. Profits up 18% by eliminating tailing pond construction. More pages. Payments to dump waste at night. Notes about cutting costs. Then a letter, December 1871. From Engineer Whitman. Mr. Kincaid, I must protest discharge of tailings into Thunder Creek. My tests show mercury contamination lethal to livestock and humans. The native camp downstream will be affected within months. I strongly recommend immediate containment. In the margin, Kincaid's handwriting, Whitman talks too much. Deal with it. No camp, no witnesses, no liability. 2 weeks later, O. Whitman died in riding accident. Coroner ruled accidental. Camp flooded as predicted. Problem solved. Wakiza's hands shook. Here it was. Proof Kincaid had known the poison would kill his people. Proof he ordered the engineers silenced. Proof the flood was deliberate. Open the dam, destroy the camp, eliminate witnesses. His brother had been murdered. All of them murdered. Dr. Rousseau read over his shoulder and drew a sharp breath. I remember Whitman. They brought his body to my clinic, set his horse through him. Did it? The skull fracture was consistent with a fall, or being struck from behind. Her voice was tight. I noted the inconsistency but was told not to pursue it. They killed him to keep him quiet, Lucia whispered. And they killed my people to cover tracks. Wakiza said, voice flat, locking emotion down, because if he let it out now, he could not finish. Lucia began copying pages, writing fast despite cramping hand. Maka watched the door. The floor rumbled. What was that? Not blasting, Dr. Rousseau said. A shift, ground settling. The rumble grew. Dust sifted from the ceiling. Outside, men shouted. An ore cart on a slight incline began to roll, brake not set or released. It picked up speed, screeching on rails. Move! Wakiza grabbed Lucia. The cart careened toward them. Maka shoved Dr. Rousseau aside, but the cart clipped him. The impact was brutal iron meeting flesh. He went down screaming, leg bent, wrong bone visible through torn skin. Blood pooled. The cart crashed into a support post, splintering wood. The ceiling sagged. More shouts, footsteps pounding, lanterns bobbing. Go! Maka gasped. Do not let this be for nothing. We are not leaving you. You will get us killed. Go, I will follow. Wakiza grabbed him under the arms. Lucia stuffed copied pages inside her shirt. Dr. Rousseau grabbed her bag and Maka's other arm. They ran, dragging him, his broken leg trailing, leaving blood. Guards blocked the main entrance, 5 men with rifles shouting. Wakiza turned into a side passage, barely wide enough, walls pressing close. They moved single file, Maka between them, legs scraping stone, breathing, ragged. The shaft angled down, then dropped suddenly. They fell into cold water. The river slammed them against rocks. Wakiza's head struck something, stars, exploding warm blood, mixing with cold water. He went under swallowed water, came up choking. He hooked his arm around an exposed root muscle, screaming against the current. Lucia surfaced beside him, gasping. He grabbed her, anchoring her. Hold on. Dr. Rousseau came up downstream, flailing bag clutched tight. She grabbed a branch. Maka surfaced, last leg, trailing face contorted with pain, beyond screaming. The current tried to tear them away. Wakiza held on arm, burning shoulder, threatening to dislocate. He pulled Lucia closer, feeling her pressed against him, both shaking with cold and shock. They stayed frozen, desperate, until guards stopped searching above. Then slowly they dragged themselves onto a gravel bar miles downstream. They lay coughing, water shaking. Maka's leg was a mess. Dr. Rousseau went to work immediately, tourniquet setting, bone face gray, despite her own injuries. But they had the evidence. She pulled the pages from Lucia's shirt, half-soaked ink running but readable. The key information, dates, names, Kincaid's note about eliminating witnesses, still clear. They knew, she whispered. They knew it would kill people. They murdered the engineer. They murdered your people deliberately. Wakiza stared at the pages, seeing Lakota's face. All of it calculated. All for profit. Now we make them pay, he said quietly. Now we make sure everyone knows. Back in Thunder Creek, Wakiza expected the evidence to change everything. Instead, Kincaid moved first. They had barely reached town by mid-morning, exhausted, battered Maka barely conscious when Bison Bill came galloping in. Fire at the mine, he shouted. Sabotage, they tried to burn it down. People poured into the street. Sheriff Pike appeared with a shotgun. Who did it? The engine. Bill pointed at Wakiza. Him and that foreign woman. Broke and stole property, started a fire. Ore cart smashed a support. We are lucky the whole place did not collapse. That is a lie, Lucia said, shaking with fury. We only copied... Copied what? Kincaid stepped from the courthouse in a gray suit, face smooth. Company records are private property. Theft is theft. Breaking and entering is a crime. Wakiza felt the ground shift. This was not defense. This was attack. Kincaid had turned their investigation into crime. The crowd gathered. Cheyenne Charlie pushed forward. "Hang him before he burns down the valley." Murmurs ran through the crowd. Fear was powerful, and Kincaid wielded it like a weapon. Wakiza opened his mouth to speak to show evidence, but 3 men rushed him from behind. Fists and rifle stocks slammed his back shoulder's head. He went down hard, vision blurring. Lucia lunged forward, trying to shield him, trying to pull papers from her shirt. A backhand split her lip further. Blood ran down her chin. She spat at the man and tried to claw him, but rough hands grabbed her papers, falling into the street. "Enough!" Kincaid's voice cut through chaos. "We are not savages. He will stand trial. Lock him in the jail." They hauled Wakiza up. His head swam. Blood dripped from a cut above his eye. But the worst pain was seeing the pages scattered in dirt, trampled under boots, crushed and torn and lost. The jail was crude stone, more cellar than prison. They threw him into a cell, barely 6 feet square iron bars, set in rock, a slop bucket in the corner. The door clanged shut with finality. Through the small window, he could see the yellow barn in the distance. His brother had died in its shadow. Now Wakiza might hang within sight of it. But the others were still free. The fight was not over. That night, Dr. Rousseau came to the jail under pretense of checking his injuries. Deputy Gus Young, nervous, let her in because refusing a doctor was bad luck. He took a beating. If he dies from neglect, marshals will have questions. Gus shifted uncomfortably. "Make it quick." Inside, Dr. Rousseau examined his head wound, bruised ribs, swollen jaw. When she leaned close to check his pupils, she whispered, "Lucia paid Gus's gambling debt. $300. He will be at the saloon within the hour, not back until dawn. Can you widen the gap at the base of the north wall if we give you a tool?" Wakiza's eyes flicked to where bars met stone foundation. The mortar was old, crumbling. "Yes." Dr. Rousseau straightened, speaking loudly. "He needs laudanum for pain. I will apply it topically." She opened a bottle, poured liquid onto cloth, pressed it to his forehead ostensibly to clean the wound. But the cloth went over Gus's face. Gus had stepped too close, curious. The chloroform took him down in seconds. Dr. Rousseau caught him, lowered him gently. 15 minutes before he wakes. Less if we are unlucky. Lucia appeared in the doorway, breathing hard, a metal file clutched like a weapon. She slid it through bars. "Can you use this?" Wakiza took the file and went to work on mortar at the wall base. It was soft, weakened by moisture. He scraped and pried. Sweat dripped into his eyes. His hands cramped. But stone began to shift mortar, falling in chunks. Maka hobbled in on a crutch face drawn with pain. "Hurry! Charlie just left the saloon." One stone came loose, then another. The gap widened. Wakiza squeezed through shoulders, scraping ribs, protesting, until he was out. "Now what?" Lucia asked. "Now we finish this, before Kincaid finishes us." Dr. Rousseau had saved one page, the most damning one, Whitman's letter, with Kincaid's handwritten note. She pulled it from her bag, protected in oilcloth. "This is all we have. One page. Will it be enough?" "It has to be. We are out of time." A storm rolled over the hills that night, sudden, savage. Rain hammered down in sheets. Wind tore at anything loose. Thunder cracked like artillery shaking ground. Under that chaos, Kincaid moved his final pieces. They learned of the plan from Thomas, a miner with a conscience who had watched too many friends die. He found them in an abandoned line shack 2 miles from town, like Kincaid's moving wagons tonight. Thomas said water streaming from his hat. 6 wagons loaded with tailings. Mercury, arsenic, lead, everything. He is taking them to that damn Wakiza built above Lot 17B. Going to blow it apart with blasting powder, send it all downstream. By morning it will look like storm damage. No evidence, no witnesses. What witnesses? Lucia asked. The homesteads. Dr. Rousseau said, face pale. 3 new families camped near the creek. German immigrants. If Kincaid floods that valley, they will drown, Wakiza finished. Just like my people. Eliminate witnesses. Make it look natural. We have to stop him, Lucia said. How? Maka demanded. We are 4 people. He has 20 men, maybe more. Then we give them a reason. Wakiza interrupted. He checked his rifle-loaded fresh caps powder dry. Thomas, how many miners would stand with us? Thomas hesitated. 12, maybe. Men sick of watching friends die. But they are scared. Kincaid pays their wages. Then we show them proof. We stop those wagons before they reach the dam. They rode through the storm, 8 riders now. Wakiza, Lucia, Maka, Dr. Rousseau, Thomas, and 3 miners. Thomas had rallied Hans Joseph and a younger man named Samuel. Mud flew from hooves. Lightning forked across the sky. Thunder rolled. They caught the wagons near a narrow ford where the road pinched between swollen river and sheer rock. But Wakiza's breath caught when he saw how many men Kincaid had sent. Not 8 or 10 guards. Nearly 20 armed riders surrounded the wagons, outriders, front and back flankers on both sides. Kincaid knew this was his last play. He had sent everything he had. That is too many. Thomas breathed beside him. Then we even the odds, Wakiza said. We do not fight them all at once. We break them apart. He turned to his small group. Thomas, Hans, Joseph, you take position at the tree line. When I give the signal, you fire over their heads. Make them think there are more of us. Maka, you and Samuel block the rear escape route. Dr. Rousseau, you stay with the horses and have your medical kit ready. Lucia, you are with me. What are we doing? Lucia asked. Taking the lead wagon. Once it goes, the rest will panic. They split up. Wakiza and Lucia crept through the storm-lashed darkness toward the head of the column. Rain pounded them, turning the world into gray chaos. Perfect cover. Bison Bill Harker rode at the front of the column, hunched against range shotgun across his saddle. Behind him, the 6 wagons rolled slowly, wheels sinking deep in mud teams struggling. Wakiza waited until they reached the ford where the road narrowed most. Then he gave a low whistle. Gunfire erupted from the tree line, Thomas and his miners shooting high. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness. Bullets whined overhead. Bill's men wheeled their horses confused, trying to identify the threat. Some fired back blindly into the trees. Others tried to steady the panicking wagon teams. In that chaos, Wakiza spurred his horse forward. He leaned low over the saddle rein, stinging his face, and came alongside the lead wagon at a full gallop. He leapt from horseback onto the driver's bench, crashing into Bison Bill with explosive force. They grappled immediately. Bill was bigger, heavier, trying to shove him off, reaching for his shotgun. The wagon lurched wildly beneath them, wheels skidding on slick mud. The driver beside them scrambled to control the team, shouting curses. Bill's meaty fist slammed into Wakiza's jaw, snapping his head back. Stars burst. He tasted blood. Bill grabbed him by the throat, squeezing, trying to throw him off the moving wagon. Wakiza drove his knee into Bill's gut once, twice. Bill grunted, but did not let go. They rolled on the bench, the wagon tilting dangerously as it approached the river's edge. Behind them, barrels of mine tailings sloshed and shifted. Lucia rode along the wagon's side through the chaos, revolver in both hands, rain streaming down her face. She aimed at the rear wheel, the massive wooden wheel churning through mud. Her first shot missed. Her second splintered a spoke. Her third shattered it completely. The wheel collapsed with a crack like breaking bone. The wagon lurched violently sideways, bed tilting at a sickening angle. Barrels slid, crashed into each other. One broke open, spilling gray sludge across the road. Bill and Wakiza tumbled off the bench as the wagon tipped. They hit the mud hard, separating, then scrambling to their feet. Bill pulled a knife, long, cruel, meant for gutting. "I am going to cut your throat and feed you to the river," Bill snarled. They circled in the mud and rain. Bill lunged, knife flashing. Wakiza dodged, but the blade caught his shirt, tearing fabric. Bill was relentless, pressing forward with the confidence of a man who had killed before and enjoyed it. Wakiza feinted left, then drove his boot into Bill's knee. Something crunched. Bill howled, stumbled. But he was tough. He caught himself and swung the knife in a wide arc that forced Wakiza back toward the river's edge. Behind them, the wagon continued to slide, dragged by the panicking team toward the gorge. The driver jumped clear. Two of Kincaid's men tried to grab the reins, but the horses were beyond control. Bill charged shoulder down, trying to tackle Wakiza into the river. But Wakiza had been a scout, had learned to fight from men who survived by reading their opponent's intentions. He saw Bill's weight shift, his center of gravity commit. At the last moment, Wakiza sidestepped and used Bill's own momentum against him. He grabbed Bill's coat, pivoted, and threw his hip into Bill's midsection, redirecting all that mass and fury. Bill's eyes went wide as he realized he was going over. His boots skidded on the slick mud. He clawed at Wakiza, at the air, at nothing, but his momentum carried him past the point of recovery. The riverbank crumbled under his weight. He fell backward, arms windmilling. As he went over the edge, the broken wagon, dragged by the still panicked horses, came crashing toward the same spot. Bill tried to scramble up, mouth open in a scream. But the wagon's momentum was too great. It tumbled over the edge, one of the heavy wheels catching Bill's chest, driving him down into the churning water below. The sound of his body hitting rocks was lost in the storm. But Wakiza saw the moment of impact, saw Bill's form tumble like a broken doll before the wagon, and its deadly cargo crashed down on top of him, barrels bursting poison and man swallowed by the river's fury. Wakiza stood at the edge, breathing hard rain washing the mud and blood from his face. He felt no triumph, only grim necessity. He turned back toward the chaos. The remaining wagons were in disarray. With their leader gone and gunfire still coming from the trees, Kincaid's men were breaking. Some fled into the storm. Others threw down their weapons and raised their hands. Thomas and his miners emerged from the tree line. Maka and Samuel rode up from blocking the rear. Between them, they had captured or scattered nearly all of Kincaid's force. "The wagons," Wakiza said. "We burn them. Use their own blasting powder." Thomas rigged the explosives with a waterproofed fuse, 3 minutes, maybe 4. They lit it and ran, mounting horses and riding hard upstream. The explosion was enormous. 6 wagons, dozens of barrels, enough powder to bring down a mine shaft, all going up at once. Fire bloomed orange and red against the black storm. Debris flew. When the smoke cleared, there was nothing but scorched earth and twisted metal. The poison was gone, but Kincaid was still out there. They found him at the old wooden bridge spanning the gorge, the same bridge that carried ore wagons between mine and valley. A rickety structure of split logs and iron spikes swaying in the wind. Kincaid stood in the middle, rain streaming down his ruined suit. 4 men stood with him, rifles ready. And wired to the support beams beneath were barrels of blasting powder fuses trailing into Kincaid's hand. "Come any closer and I blow it," Kincaid shouted. "I will drop this whole bridge into the gorge and take all of you with me." Wakiza dismounted slowly, rifle in hand, and walked onto the swaying planks. Behind him, Lucia followed, revolver ready. Maka and Dr. Rousseau kept the horses back. "It is over, Kincaid," Wakiza said. We have proof. We know what you did. Kincaid laughed, harsh, bitter. Proof, you have 1 page. My lawyers will eat it apart. You have nothing. We have witnesses, Dr. Rousseau called from the bank. Thomas and Hans and a dozen miners ready to testify. My medical records documenting deaths. Dimitri's testimony about being paid to stay silent. The Lakota camp's testimony about the flood. We have enough. Nothing that will stand in a territorial court. Kincaid spat. You know who the judge is, who pays his salary. No jury will believe you over me. He was right. A local court would rule for Kincaid. Money bought justice. But a federal court will listen, said a new voice. Everyone turned. A man stood on the bank, middle-aged, hard-faced, wearing a long coat and a silver star. U.S. Marshal James Thornton. Marshal, Kincaid said, voice losing confidence. This is a local matter. Murder concerns me, Thornton said flatly. Especially murder of native peoples under federal protection. That flood happened on land covered by treaty. That makes it federal. And if you have evidence, it was deliberate. We do. Wakiza said, holding up the page. Dated and signed, ordering the engineer silenced. Admitting knowledge of poison. Calling the camp a liability to be eliminated. Kincaid's face went pale. You flooded my camp. Wakiza said, walking closer. You murdered the engineer. You poisoned the land. You killed my brother. Dakota was 16 years old. He died because you opened a dam to destroy evidence. Your people were in the way. Kincaid shouted desperately. The mine needed water rights. You were trespassing on granted land. It was my brother, Wakiza said quietly. It was personal to me. A shot rang from one of Kincaid's men, a desperate attempt. The bullet whined past Lucia's head. She ducked, fired back. Maka balanced on one leg, put a bullet through the shooter's shoulder. The man spun off the embankment, screaming. Kincaid lit the fuse. The spark caught, racing along waxed cord toward the barrels beneath the bridge. 30 seconds, maybe less. Run, Thornton shouted. But Lucia saw the fuse and did not run. She sprinted forward, instead, boots slipping on wet planks. The bridge swayed wildly. The gorge yawned below black water, churning over rocks 100 feet down. Kincaid raised his pistol, aiming at her. Wakiza threw himself forward without thought or hesitation. He closed the distance in 3 long strides, putting his body between gun and Lucia, just as Kincaid fired. The bullet tore through Wakiza's left shoulder instead of Lucia's heart punching through muscle, exiting his back in a spray of blood. The impact spun him sideways. White-hot pain exploded through his chest and arm. He staggered, vision graying, but did not fall. Lucia reached the fuse and dropped to her knees, hands closing around the burning cord. Flame bit into her fingers, burning, blistering. But she held on and ripped it free with desperate strength. She hurled it over the railing into the torrent below. It disappeared with a hiss. For a moment, everything stopped. Rain fell. Wind howled, but the bridge did not explode. Kincaid stared at the extinguished fuse at the marshal with his drawn gun, at Wakiza, bleeding but still standing. Then something inside him broke. His face twisted with rage and desperation, the look of a man with nothing left to lose. No, he screamed. I will not let you take it all. He lunged at Wakiza, pistol raised like a club. Not calculated violence now, but pure animal fury. He swung wildly, the gun's barrel whistling through air. Wakiza, wounded and exhausted, barely got his arm up to block. The blow glanced off his forearm, numbing it. Pain radiated from his shoulder wound. Blood soaked his shirt, making the fabric cling. Kincaid pressed forward, swinging again, trying to beat him down. You ruined everything. Everything I built. I will not go down alone. He aimed for Wakiza's head, a killing blow. But Wakiza had fought wounded before, had learned to push past pain to use an opponent's fury against them. As Kincaid swung, Wakiza ducked under the wild arc and drove his shoulder, his good shoulder, into Kincaid's chest. Not a gentle push, but a full-body tackle, all his remaining strength focused into that single point of impact. Kincaid stumbled backward, boots skidding on the wet planks. He tried to catch himself, arms pinwheeling, but his heel caught on a broken board, one of the rotten planks that had been weakening for years. The board splintered beneath his weight. Kincaid's eyes went wide as he felt empty air beneath his boot. He teetered on the edge, gravity pulling him back. He dropped his pistol and grabbed for the railing with both hands, fingers closing on wood. For a heartbeat, he hung there, suspended between bridge and void. Wakiza stood 3 feet away, watching. One step, one shove. That was all it would take. Justice for Lakota. For his mother. For everyone who had died, because this man valued silver more than lives. But he did not move. "You are not worth it," Wakiza said quietly. "The law will have you. You will live long enough to lose everything." Kincaid's face twisted with hatred. "If I go down..." He released the railing with one hand and lunged forward, trying to grab Wakiza, trying to drag him over the edge. But his grip was already failing, his weight already falling. Wakiza simply stepped back. Kincaid's fingers clawed empty air. His other hand slipped from the wet railing. He fell backward with a scream that echoed off the canyon walls. But he did not fall into the river. 15 feet below the bridge, a narrow rocky ledge jutted out, the same ledge that had probably saved the bridge from complete collapse years ago. Kincaid hit it hard, the impact brutal. Both his legs bent at unnatural angles with cracks like breaking branches. He screamed, high, ragged, full of agony. Wakiza walked to the edge and looked down at the man who had killed his brother. Kincaid clawed at rock, trying to pull himself up, but his shattered legs were useless. Blood pooled beneath him, mixing with rain. "Help me," Kincaid gasped, face gray with shock. "Pull me up. I will tell you everything. I will confess. Just help me." "Marshal Thornton will arrange your rescue," Wakiza said. "You will stand trial. You will answer for every death. And you will spend whatever life remains knowing you lost everything you tried to build." He turned away from Kincaid's screams and curses, leaving him broken on the ledge. Lucia caught him as he swayed. "You are bleeding?" "I know. You are an idiot for stepping in front of a bullet." "I know that too." She pressed cloth against his shoulder, wound her touch gentle despite the urgency. "Why did you do that?" "Because I let go once," Wakiza said, thinking of Lakota's hand slipping from his in the flood. "I will not let go again." Their eyes met, rain streaming between them. Something passed in that moment, not just gratitude, but recognition. They had saved each other more than once now. Had chosen to stand together when running would have been easier. Marshal Thornton organized Kincaid's rescue, though it took ropes and a makeshift stretcher. They hauled him up like cargo, his screams echoing. Both legs shattered, spine likely damaged. He would never walk again. Would stand trial from a wheeled chair. The storm began to ease. Thunder rumbled away. Rain slowed to drizzle. And in the distance, visible through breaking clouds, the yellow barn stood bright against dawn. When the storm cleared, federal marshals found a crippled industrialist, destroyed wagons, barrels of powder wired to a bridge, and one damning ledger page. Dr. Rousseau's medical notes documented 19 deaths matching mercury poisoning over 4 years. Dimitri testified about being paid for silence threatened when he wanted to leave, watching his cattle die. Mahka testified about the flood, how it came during drought, how the water smelled wrong, how they found mining signs in the wreckage. Thomas Hans and 11 other miners testified about working conditions, about dumping tailings at night, about the engineer who died mysteriously. They spoke of friends who coughed blood of warnings, ignored of profits over lives. Lucia brought her letter promising 17B proof Kincaid had used poisoned land to lure desperate immigrants. She testified about Bruce's threats, her son nearly drinking poison. Marshal Thornton arrested Kincaid on federal charges murder of a federal engineer conspiracy destruction of property under treaty protection criminal negligence fraud. The trial took place in Denver. A federal judge heard the case. Eastern newspapers sent reporters. The story became a scandal reaching Washington. The jury deliberated 2 hours. Guilty on all counts, Kincaid was sentenced to 20 years hard labor, followed by permanent loss of all mining rights. The Quicksilver mine was shut permanently. Equipment was sold at auction, proceeds distributed to victims' families. The land was declared contaminated, placed under federal trust. Engineers built settling ponds for remaining waste, diverted contaminated water, began cleanup that would take years. Barbed wire fencing the clean river was cut, opening water to all. And in Thunder Creek, the yellow barn was rebuilt by many hands. Lakota carpenters worked alongside German farmers, Irish settlers, Italian families. They raised new beams, replaced the roof with the same bright yellow, so no one would forget. They kept the support post with carved names, adding new ones below. Not of the dead, but the living. People who survived, who refused to let tragedy be the end. Inside, they divided the space. One stall became Dr. Rousseau's clinic. Another became a grain store maintained cooperatively. The loft became a schoolroom where Lucia taught children of all backgrounds. During rebuilding, there were gentler moments. One October afternoon, Lucia climbed a ladder to hang herbs under new eaves. Wind picked up, suddenly pushing the ladder sideways. She grabbed the beam above Hart, lurching. Wakiza's arm, still bandaged, but strong enough to work, braced the ladder with his good shoulder. His hand closed around a rung near her boot. "You cannot stop every fall," she said. "I can try." He handed up a wooden peg without looking away. She took it, their fingers brushing that contact now familiar. Not romance exactly, but something deeper built on shared survival. Another day, Maka found Wakiza repairing a hinge. "You could have killed him. Kincaid. You had the chance." "I know." "So why did you not?" Wakiza set down his tools. "Because if I had, the story would be about a vengeful Lakota murdering a businessman. The trial would have been mine. Every newspaper would call it proof we are savages. And everyone he poisoned would have died for nothing. The mine would have stayed open. Nothing would have changed except I would hang, and Kincaid would be a martyr." Maka was silent and then nodded slowly. "You are wiser than I am." "No, just more tired of losing. This way Kincaid loses everything: money, reputation, freedom, power. This way the law admits what he did was wrong. This way we win." Dr. Rousseau received confirmation from Denver. The water contained mercury in quantities deadly to people, and livestock, plus arsenic led other metals. Contamination extended 5 miles downstream. The report entered federal record as evidence of scope. Dimitri moved into town, took carpenter work, helped rebuild. He carved a wooden horse for Marco, who treasured it. And slowly, the land began to heal. Contaminated creek was diverted to settling ponds. Clean water from tributaries channeled through new ditches. It would take years for soil to recover, for grass to grow thick, for fish to return. But it was a start. 6 weeks after the trial, a federal surveyor arrived with updated maps and documents sealed in red wax. Precise, bespectacled, wearing a suit despite autumn cold. He asked to meet at the yellow barn. A long table was set up inside. Wakiza, Lucia, Maka, Dr. Rousseau, Dimitri, Marshal Thornton, and others gathered. The surveyor spread maps weighted corners with stones. "I have been reviewing land titles as part of federal investigation," he said in a dry voice. "I found irregularities, specifically regarding Lot 17B and water rights." He pulled out Wakiza's deed and laid it on the table. He traced faded lines pointed to tiny script near the bottom. This clause was written into the original grant in 1834. It reads, "Parcel 17B, to remain buffer between tribal boundaries and freehold claims, should legal title pass to a native owner under any circumstances. Water rights to Thunder Creek and all adjoining tributaries within 2 miles shall be held in common and shared in perpetuity with all local residents, both tribal and settler, under the authority and discretion of said native title holder." Stunned silence. "What does that mean?" Lucia asked. Marshal Thornton leaned forward. "It means when Wakiza purchased this land, he triggered a legal protection written into the original survey, but never enforced. The clause was meant to encourage peace by creating shared resources, but it was forgotten." "So what does it mean now?" Maka demanded. "It means Mr. Wakiza holds legal authority over water rights to Thunder Creek within 2 miles. He can determine who has access under what terms for what purposes. The water cannot be bought, sold, or monopolized, including by mining companies, without his explicit written consent. And that consent can be revoked if he determines misuse or contamination." Wakiza stared at the paper, at the tiny clause he had glanced at, and dismissed. The deed he bought for $5 had given him power over the very resource Kincaid had killed to control. "But the mine," someone started. "The mine is permanently closed by federal order," Thornton said. "Land seized placed in federal trust, cannot be developed without formal inspection and approval from federal authorities and—" He smiled slightly. "The recognized water authority for Thunder Creek, which is now Mr. Wakiza. So no one can poison the water again without his permission," Dr. Rousseau said slowly. "Exactly. Furthermore, the clause grants Mr. Wakiza the right to petition federal courts directly if he believes the water is threatened, bypassing local authorities who might be compromised." Lucia looked at Wakiza. "You own the water." "We own the water," Wakiza corrected. "This land, this barn, belongs to everyone who needs it to survive. The water is the same. It flows through Lakota camps and settler farms alike. No one person should control it." In the following days, Wakiza worked with Thornton tribal elders and immigrant representatives to create a water-sharing agreement. Written in 3 languages, English, Lakota, German, so everyone could read it, it established rules for access, conservation, dispute, resolution, protection. Every family within 2 miles had equal rights to draw water for household use and irrigation. Commercial use required council approval. Pollution was forbidden and punishable by federal law. It was not perfect. There would be disputes, hard years when water was scarce. But it was fair, it was equitable, and it gave everyone a voice. On a cold November morning, Wakiza rode alone to where his brother died. The prairie grass had turned brown with first frosts. The sky was pale blue. The air smelled of coming snow. He found the spot by memory, a bend in the creek where current had hit hardest. Nothing marked it now, but he remembered. He stood at the water's edge, watching it flow clear and cold over stones. The poison was gone. Fish had started returning, small ones, but they were there. Life coming back. "I found out what happened," Wakiza said quietly to the wind, to the water, to memory. "I found who did it, and I made them pay. Not with blood, I know you would have wanted blood, you always did, but with justice. Real justice. The kind that lasts." He closed his eyes, seeing Dakota's face clearly, laughing eyes bright with mischief, so full of life It hurt to remember. The land is healing. The people are building something new. Lakota and settlers working together, using the water together. It is what you would have wanted. You always said we should find a way to live with them instead of just fighting. The wind blew cold, carrying sage and distant snow. I met someone, an Italian woman named Lucia. She has a son. She is stubborn and brave, and does not give up. I think you would have liked her. I think she would have made you laugh. He opened his eyes, looking at water flowing endlessly toward the valley. I will not let go again. I will protect this place, these people, this water. I will make sure what happened to you never happens to anyone else. That is my promise to you, little brother. That is how I will honor your memory. He stood for a long time, watching the creek flow, feeling cold seep through his clothes, remembering. Then he mounted his horse and rode back toward the yellow barn. Visible even from here, a bright spot against brown prairie smoke rising from its chimney, a sign that people were there, that life continued. 3 months later, in early spring, 1875, when first green shoots pushed through thawing ground, the yellow barn hosted its first community gathering. Tables were set up in the yard, long planks on sawhorses covered with dishes from every family within 10 miles. Roasted venison from Lakota hunters, bread and preserves from German housewives, pasta with tomato sauce from Lucia, made from her mother's recipe, corn pudding, apple pie, strong, terrible coffee everyone drank because it was hot. Children of many backgrounds chased each other around the yard, shouting in 3 languages and inventing a 4th. Old enemies discovered common ground, complaining about territorial government. Young people flirted across cultural boundaries. Wakiza stood in the doorway, watching with satisfaction mixed with disbelief. The deed to 17B was framed, now hanging on the wall beside a photograph of the barn, before and after rebuilding. A reminder of what had been overcome. Lucia came out carrying bread, Marco dancing at her heels. She set the basket down, then walked over to join Wakiza, standing close enough their shoulders almost touched. "It is loud," she said, watching chaos with a small smile. "It is alive," he replied. They stood in comfortable silence, watching children play and adults argue good-naturedly about potatoes. "I have been thinking," Lucia said carefully, not looking at him, "about staying. Not just camping by the fence, actually staying. Building something permanent, if that would be acceptable." Wakiza felt something loosen in his chest, tension he had carried without realizing. "It would be acceptable. More than acceptable. I do not have money for land. The land is already spoken for, but a barn needs people to maintain it. A school needs a teacher. A community needs someone who will stand up and fight when things are wrong. Those are not things you pay for with money." She looked at him, then really looked, dark eyes searching his face. "What are you saying?" "I am saying stay, build a house, plant a garden, teach the children. Make this place your home, you and Marco. You belong here as much as anyone. And you, where do you belong?" He thought about years of wandering, of never quite fitting anywhere. About the Lakota camp where he was born, but which felt too small. About white towns where he would always be an outsider. "Here," he said finally. "I belong here, in this place between worlds, with people building something new instead of fighting over what was lost." Lucia nodded slowly. Then, with boldness that surprised them both, she took his hand. Not a romantic gesture exactly, but something deeper, a promise, a commitment, acknowledgement of everything they had survived together and might build if they chose. "Then we stay," she said. "Both of us." Marco came running up, breathless and excited. "Mama," Mahka is teaching us to make arrows. Can I learn, please? If he is willing to teach you, may learn. But be respectful and be careful. The boy ran off shouting thanks. Lucia shook her head, smiling. He needs a father. A boy needs a man to teach him things. He has Maka now, and Dmitri, and Thomas. He has a whole community of men who will teach him. That is not what I meant, Lucia said, squeezing his hand. Wakiza looked down at their joined hands, his copper-skinned and scarred, hers pale and marked with burns. Different, but somehow fitting together. I know what you meant. But that is something we should talk about when it is quieter, when there is time, when we are sure. I am sure. I have been sure since you stepped in front of that bullet. But I can wait until you are sure too. She released his hand and went back to the tables, leaving him with a heart that felt both lighter and heavier. Dr. Rousseau appeared at his elbow. She is good for you. I know. You are good for her too, and for the boy. I hope so. Do not hope. Make it true. You have spent 3 years hunting truth about your brother's death. You found it. You brought justice. Now you need to decide what comes next. Revenge is done. Mourning is done. What remains is living. And living requires making choices about the future, not just settling accounts from the past. When did you become a philosopher? I have always been a philosopher. You have just been too busy seeking vengeance to notice. Now stop being an idiot and go help Lucia before she decides you are useless. He laughed a real laugh, surprised and genuine, and went to help. The gathering lasted until evening, when the sun set in orange and purple bands across the western sky. Lanterns were lit. Children were rounded up and carried home. Adults lingered reluctant to let the day end. Mahka found Wakiza as people departed. I am going back to the camp tomorrow. The elders want me to help organize patrols along the water. They asked if you would come speak about the water agreement. I will come, but I am staying here. This is my home now. The barn, this land, these people. Mahka nodded, understanding. You are building a bridge between what was and what could be. Someone has to. Might as well be us. They clasped hands in the old way, forearm to forearm, the grip of warriors and brothers and men who had faced death together and survived. Lakota would be proud, Mahka said quietly, of what you did, what you are doing. I hope so. After everyone left, the Wakiza walked through the barn one last time. The building smelled of fresh wood and clean straw and lingering food. On the wall beside the framed deed was the support post with carved names. He ran his fingers over them, Johnson, Henderson, Kowalski, and others. Stories of loss, reminders of cost, but also proof that people had tried, had hoped, had refused to give up. Below those names, someone had carved new ones. Wakiza, Lucia, Marco, Helene, Mahka, Thomas, Hans, Dmitri. And below those, space left for more. Space for people who would come after, who would build on the foundation laid here. The barn was not cursed. It never had been. It was just a building, paint and wood and nails, given meaning by the people who refused to abandon it. Lucia came to stand beside him, Marco asleep on her shoulder, his small body heavy with exhaustion. What are you thinking? She asked quietly. That this is enough. This is what justice looks like. Not revenge, not blood. Just people living together, sharing water, raising children, building something that lasts. And is it enough? He thought about his brother, about the flood, about years of anger that had driven him here. He thought about the moment on the bridge when he could have killed Kincaid, but chose not to. He thought about the deed in his pocket water, flowing clean, children playing in 3 languages. Yes, he said. "It is enough." They stood together in the doorway, Lakota warrior, Italian widow, sleeping child, looking out at land as twilight deepened. Stars began to appear sharp and bright. Somewhere, a coyote sang. Tomorrow, there would be work. Always more work. Fields to plant, fences to mend disputes, to mediate, children to teach. The challenges of building a new community from old enemies. But tonight, for this moment, there was peace. The yellow barn stood solid and bright against the darkening prairie, a beacon for anyone who needed refuge, justice, or simply a place to rest. No longer cursed, no longer poisoned. Just alive, full of promise, and waiting to see what stories would be carved into its bones in the years to come. And that Wakiza thought was the best kind of ending, the kind that was really a beginning.